Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Influence podcast. I'm Paula Kioki, CEO of Outward Media, your host today. And we have Carolyn Hodson. She is a managing director of Woolf Hodson from across the pond in the UK. Great to have you, Carolyn. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Paula. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Thank you. So, today we're going to discuss how modern B2B marketing operations drive results through smarter use of people, process technology, and data. Carolyn's going to share with us how Wolf Hudson helps companies build scalable infrastructure, boost lead conversion, and turn performance insights into meaningful sales funnel impact. That's a big mouthful, Carolyn.
There's a lot to be done out there. I,
Yeah,
I
there's a
promise you,
lot to
there's a
be
lot to be done.
done. So let's dive in. So, Carolyn, you help marketing leaders build infrastructure that drives measurable performance. What's the biggest operational gap you're seeing right now in B2B organizations, and how are you advising your clients to close it?
Well, it's a complex world that's getting
Mhm.
more
Yes.
complicated. I'd say that there's no one silver bullet that
Mhm.
is going to solve these, but the reality is the biggest challenge that's facing marketing leaders is data
Mm,
in many facets. Capturing the right data, processing that data, making it accessible for use, and being able to report on it. But
mhm.
let's break it down because it's not just a one word doesn't answer it. So it's about having the right infrastructure in place to capture all the signals from customers and prospects against all the topics across any channel. And it is all about now, where they want to meet you. So
Mhm.
you have to have an infrastructure that operates not just within your direct environment, but on a little broader scale as well. People talk about intent and they talk about intent signals and that happen outside of your immediately owned environment.
Right.
And the challenge, of course, from a data perspective is that you have to capture all of those.
Mm,
We know that there's a reduction in or a drop off, let's call it a drop off in web traffic
mhm,
to a brand's website. And
mhm.
that is because of AI, that is because of the different LLMs, but also the people are relying much more on peer to peer communication. So those signals of interest in your topic and your brand, it gets harder and harder to
Mhm.
find them and capture them and then process them. But also once you've captured them, you then have to have the ability to trigger relevant reactions and activities based on those signals.
Mhm.
So you have to have an infrastructure that will capture them, process them, but then inform you how best to either from an automation perspective or actually interpretation perspective trigger a response to those signals. And then you have to track all of that.
Mhm.
So you have to track it in a consolidated format to create a single customer view. And this is where it kind of comes back to, all roads do lead to data, but you've got to have the infrastructure that enables you to do it. So whether that single view across online and offline channels. So this can no longer be just a marketing view. It
Mhm.
has to be a go-to-market view. You have to be able to look at sales. You have to be able to look at customer success, customer service, because those, when you're talking about a single customer view, all of that has to come in together, and all of that has to reside somewhere from an infrastructure perspective.
Mhm.
That means that the right individuals across the business can access and work on it. And it's only then really that you can start to assess performance. So whether it's engagement, interest, conversion, whatever that might be.
So do you, in your practice, tend to work with all three of those areas within a
We
company?
do. We do more and more. I think if you look at the as marketing expands, it was there's been a lot of focus in the last X years around demand generation, demand management.
Mhm.
The whole market is shifting to life cycle
Okay.
and how to manage the life cycle. So that acceptance that all big brands are looking for growth, but
Mhm.
that growth is going to come from existing customer base is not just new.
Just new.
So
Okay.
it's a definite shift
Okay.
in a rebalancing, let's call
Yeah.
it.
Well, I think that's important because if you've
Really
already got the
important.
customer, it's a lot easier to keep the customer than it is to find a new one,
Exactly.
right?
And growth is tough, the economic climates, but also I think the couple of shocks that have gone through the global economic um, landscape over the last 10 years, let's say,
Mhm,
have demonstrated that looking after your existing customer base becomes more and more important. But also, if you look in a SaaS world now and the SaaS products, they have to get adopted. They
mhm,
have to be expanded. You can't just land it. It's no longer just about landing the sale. It's
mhm,
that's not what it's about. It's much more about ensuring that product is used and reused, and that
mhm.
and actually renewal becomes not an option.
Right, and I think there's less loyalty with the younger,
Yeah,
Gen Z, potentially, and more
definitely.
generation, there's less loyalty.
Yeah,
Um,
without doubt. I mean, we can talk about that when we start talking about you know topics on how do you engage people, how do you make sure that you have the right um, channels and tools and mechanisms in place to you know challenge talk to the Gen Zs as well as you talk to the millennials as well as you talk to us slightly more mature
mhm,
um,
mhm.
business individuals as well.
Yeah, we find our clients are, some that are, like, building their own internal identity graphs that they're
Yep.
segmenting based on the generation
Yeah.
and communicating with them instead of that one size fits all.
You can't. You definitely can't. And that's where, you start to look at the opportunity from a infrastructure perspective, the future opportunity, I'm gonna say. When you start looking at things like AI, it does enable you to have a much better capabilities to nuance,
Mhm,
not just the what, but the how.
mhm,
Not just what you're sharing with people, but how you are able to engage with them as well. It's very different, and we're in this period of flux at the moment. We kind of look at it and go, the sales cycles are getting longer. There are more people involved.
mhm,
It's getting more, just more complex
mhm,
as a buying group. So you have to be able to look at the buyers and the influencers and understand who they are in that particular scenario. So again, this all comes back to these signals and being able to capture them, because Paula, you can be playing three different roles in three different buying scenarios, and
mhm.
we have to be able to identify that and and treat you accordingly.
Absolutely. So now, when you mentioned the infrastructure earlier on, and you're talking about capturing the signals, do you have certain platforms that you tend to work with that enable you to do that, or how are you doing it for your client?
Well, yeah, or again, it's a moving thing. We used to, if I go back through a little bit of history, there was always we called it the spine, if you like, that runs through technology. It might be, you've got the website at one side, you've got your CRM, you've got your marketing automation, you've got a reporting platform. There was a very sort of streamlined spine that sat through the middle, and it may be that it was Oracle infrastructure or a Salesforce infrastructure or Microsoft infrastructure, or mixed again.
Mhm,
I think within that now we're becoming very layered. The infrastructure is far, far more layered.
mhm,
So you've got um, on top of your internal systems, you may well have a CDP. So, for example, rather than just a Salesforce and a sales cloud and a marketing cloud, you'll have data cloud that sits across the
mhm,
top.
mhm,
And, in terms of that area where all of those signals come in, you've then started to get more intent type platforms that sit above it. So a demand base, a six sensor, you know, there's so many, so it is very layered in its approach these days. So we've gone from a spine
mhm,
with sort of ribs that hang off it
mhm.
to this layering of information and the ability, just because of the amount of it.
Bound to
You
that.
still need a a platform to distribute, publish emails and engage with them. So your marketing automation still has that. You still need your CRM. Clearly, an organization will still always need that. And it may be that there is a different CS platform
Mhm,
and customer engagement platform that may be a Service Cloud, it may be a Gain site, it may be. different brands. Um, One of the things that's quite interesting as well is the shift from, if you go back over the last period, there was definitely a shift to buying into one of those big technology
Mm-hmm.
in environments. So whether it be Salesforce, whether it be Oracle, whether it be Microsoft, there is definitely a shift that hasn't happened yet. Adobe, clearly, let's not forget Adobe in there.
Mm-hmm.
And there is definitely a shift towards best of breed again.
Mm-hmm.
And the shift, and I think this goes alongside the technologies that it was definitely owned by the CMO. There
Okay.
was this whole thing about the technology budgets going back to the CMO.
Right.
That is shifting,
Okay.
where you start to get this layered approach and you start to have a more enterprise view. Then actually a lot of the key platforms are shifting back to CTO, CIO ownership.
Okay.
And therefore there's more of these things go in circles.
Yeah,
There's
they do. They do.
always. Show me something that hasn't got
Yeah.
hasn't circled back
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Totally agree. Huh.
But there is within that layering where the beginning of saying, well, actually interoperability is key and management is key. But actually, if there is a best of breed, let's explore it. And also there are so many small, niche, fast growing, fast, agile platforms and
Okay.
organizations out there that actually organizations are beginning to think about those things again. So there's that we're definitely in some shifting sands here.
Yeah, I agree with you because one of the things that we've seen is that a lot of these companies, especially if you're an enterprise company, they'll have like 10 platforms and they may
Yeah.
be using one module each or something and
Yeah.
spending millions and millions of dollars. And do you really need to do that?
Yes, agree.
Potentially collapse that down. So,
Well, and all of those platforms clearly are increasing functionality.
hmm
So we often go in, and one of the first things we do is an audit of what are all the platforms, what are they doing, and I remember working with a CMO of a global tech company who said, "Yeah, our reporting just doesn't match. We just cannot report. We don't know what's working. We don't know what's not." And we did a full audit and got all the different user groups, owners globally together, and we discovered that there were up to 12 different platforms trying to deliver reporting. Well, it was no wonder. And actually, each one of them had a slightly different slice of things, and different data was being pulled slightly differently into different platforms. Well, no wonder none of your
can't manage
report
that.
stands up to scrutiny
Hey,
because
can't manage it.
no, no. And also, if you go then down to the sort of user groups, well, they they're just confused.
hmm
You're not sitting not in a core team, you're sitting in a field team,
hmm
and you're saying, "Well, what am I supposed to use?" There's
hmm
4 they didn't even know half of them that existed. So it's a complicated thing. And I think there's been a lot of streamlining, which is great. I think the understanding, um, of the dangers around shiny new toys
hmm
is better understood.
hmm
Again, there was a time when marketers would just spin up apps because they could.
Yeah. Yeah.
That definitely has, there are more controls around that now, and that's good. But that the core infrastructure that you're looking to support your marketing and sales and your go to market is definitely becoming more nuanced. And
Yeah.
as I say, there's this layering as opposed to this spine that has worked in the past.
And to your point, we're actually hearing more about people doing the audits because or companies, I should say, doing the
Yeah.
audit because to everything that you just said, you know,
Yeah.
what's doing what, who's using what, and how do we make any sense out of it? So, and that's
Exactly.
part of your core competency, right?
Yeah, yeah, part of the core competency because there's no point just bringing another technology in.
Mhm,
The You've got to start with requirements. You have to start with requirements. Then you look at your existing infrastructure.
mhm.
And you said earlier, it may be that this team is using that functionality, that team is using that functionality, but a lot of these platforms have, I'll switch it round. Very few of them are used to their full.
Yes,
Think.
exactly.
And actually, if you look at your requirements and say, if you then map them to your existing infrastructure and, are clear there's a gap, you then have to also look at the kind of the business prioritization that says, well, what is the value that a new platform will bring in? Because many of them are quite expensive. What
Mhm.
is the platform? What is the value it brings? And what's the offset between the kind of cost benefit analysis within there? So, you know, there is much more there's much more thorough approach, I think, to those things now. But existing, always start with the existing because the likelihood is you can do quite a lot.
Yeah, and I would imagine for your clients, it's daunting, and
It is
yeah,
daunting. It
yeah.
it is, and right, it genuinely is. I
Being a
think that
perspective from the outside come in.
I
Yeah.
think the great sort of Scott Brinkler, which everyone sort of got used to of the sort of MarTech environment, and it started off by saying, you won't believe it, there's 500 pieces of technology out there. Well, it's exponential now. It's
Yeah.
exponential. How are you supposed to navigate your way around that? Which is why I come back to you have to start with requirements.
Mhm.
What are you trying to do?
Yep, what are you trying to accomplish?
What are you trying to accomplish?
Yep,
To what end? With
yep,
what return to the business?
yep.
Then go into the process because it's too easy to jump to solution mode or I've heard this is great. I've spoken to a peer. We must have this.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Like
that is it's
the shiny new object again.
it's a shiny new object. Exactly. Exactly.
So, personalization personalization at scale is a major priority within B2B marketing. That's the big mantra right now. From your experience, what are the key technology or process barriers that stop companies from doing this well?
It's a great question. Personalization is a fascinating topic, and it becomes more fascinating, I think. But one thing I'm going to call out for sure for marketers is we have to move away from calling dear XXX
Yes.
personal. It that can no longer, you know,
Yeah.
marketers have lived on that for enough years now. We have to move on. So personalization and clearly all of these things are linked. It's all about meeting people where they are with what they want.
Mhm.
That essentially is what we got. So the aforementioned data considerations are critical, you know, but it's about having uh, infrastructure capabilities that can listen, and
Mm,
that's hard because if you think about digitally, we've got to be able to listen as well as we do in person.
mm,
To be able to make judgments that says, I know this, you've told me this,
mhm,
I've heard this, you've requested a piece of information, you've demonstrated interest by taking part in a webinar or whatever, so I can do it. And therefore, I believe, based on sound logic, you'll get value
mhm,
from what I'm going to share with you. Because if you can't make a direct link that says those are the things, and therefore you'll get value from this, you've lost the personalization before we start. And it's very interesting at the moment. We're talking about B2B and B2B influencing. There is definitely a convergence of B2B and B2C
mhm.
um, across the
Yes,
world at the
for
moment.
sure.
And there is this whole thing about we are all consumers, and therefore we have expectations, and we've talked about this for years. However, um, the B2B model of a funnel and a pipeline and the need to get leads and push them through to opportunities and down through that funnel has always sort of been the most prevalent piece. We go into these complex buying groups, then it becomes more and more about personalization
Mm,
and the need to understand those individuals and how they want to be treated as they do as B2C does, as the consumer side. And you mentioned earlier the Gen Zs,
mhm,
and it is fascinating. There is a lot of conversations, head scratching, planning at the moment about how are we going to deal with this Gen Zs when they become the buyers and the decision makers in the B2B world because they don't want to speak to anyone
yeah,
unless
right.
unless they really
Yeah.
ready to
Yeah.
speak to them. They have grown up in a world where they source information. They
Mhm.
don't really believe, fake news has been part of
Yep.
their vocabulary all the way through. So they don't really believe you when you tell them something. So you start to get far more around the peer to peer, far more around um, the need to provide all the information for them. And
Mhm.
we've worked on this stat for years about 60% of the way through the buying cycle before anyone wants to talk to you, and
Right.
now it's more like 80%. You go forward to the Gen Zs, we're talking 90% of the way. They don't want to talk to you.
Yep.
So when you're talking about personalization, it's it's that we have to reassess so much of it. And that's just the starting point. You've then got
Personalization without talking.
well, yeah. So you've got to listen double hard
Mhm.
to make sure that you can serve things up. And then you've got complicated layers on top. You've
Mhm.
got the regulatory compliance and things that's really strong in certain sectors.
Sure.
So financial services, pharma, you've got layers of complexity on restrictions on what you can and can't share, how you can and can't influence, what you can and can't say. So you have to layer those in.
And in your where you live, GDPR on top of it.
Oh, GDPR, yeah, of course. I mean, you've got California, you've got CanSpan, but it's really, I mean, we are very, very regulated on that side. It is certainly in certain markets. But then you've got this fascinating piece. And I was talking to a really well respected financial services marketing operations technology leader recently. And we were you know agreeing that the bit that gets forgotten in a much of personalization is the ethics and
Mm.
the actual ethics behind it. And again, you go back to some of the younger generations coming through, they have a very ethical stance
Mhm.
on a lot of these things. So, actually, we can't overlook any longer, again, this balance between what you want to tell them, what they want to know,
Mhm.
how you want to tell them, how they want to find out. And again, that's why I think this personalization word is one of the most interesting topics over the coming year. You add AI into it.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some really, really good breakthroughs around, particularly the sales qualification
Mhm.
area, and what the next generation beyond a chatbot, which has been fairly clunky. A lot of the chatbots they started, but they can be clunky.
And annoying.
Yeah, and annoying, and
I've
those
experienced it.
yeah,
Yeah.
haven't we all? But I think some of the developments in that area, you're never gonna
Gonna
get
get better.
you
Gonna get
you still
better.
have people. You still have people, and you need
Yeah.
people, and you've got to have judgment, and you've got to have but it is again, if you look at that end-to-end life cycle through, you know, attracting attracting a new, um contact through to engaging with them and converting them and maintaining them and building loyalty or advocacy or whatever that word is going to end up at the end of it to keep
Mhm.
them within your ecosystem. It's about looking at that overall process and going, okay, where can we sensibly layer in an AI, to use AI within that process
Mhm.
where it will add value
Value, yeah.
to that end customer and will streamline your own operation. And you've got to have that balance between them because if you no customers want friction in their engagements with you, and they want personalization and they want it to be relevant and they want it to be at the
I
right
want it
time.
all.
But they don't want it to be unethical,
Yes. Or
and
in
they don't want to
place.
feel that you're chasing them.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so this one's going to run and run
Yep.
this topic, and we're going to make breakthroughs, and then it's going to keep shifting, I think, as we go along.
That and I don't know if you're experiencing it on your side of the world, but here, I think it's the Gen Z that's all about the sustainability. What are you giving back to the
Yeah.
community? I'm gonna buy from here because this is what they're doing for the community versus not doing anything. And I'm
Yeah.
starting to see a shift, of that being presented on the websites and, making the statements about this is who we are and this is what we're doing to give back. Y
Yeah, and that's that ethics piece, and
That's
we
me.
can't, I don't think that has necessarily been a part of decision making or process development to date,
Okay.
and I think it will be
I think it will be.
moving
Okay.
forward. I think it will become more because of these new generations, because what matters to them, and because if you want to be credible and engaging
Mm,
to them,
mhm.
then as in a B2C world, you've got to start demonstrating more of that
Human.
understanding and empathy, is what I'm gonna say, is in its broadest sense, without oversimplifying
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think years and years ago, I'm sure you experienced this, B2B was just looked at as, we're selling a product and that's it,
Yeah.
now that
Yeah.
there was no human touch to
Yeah.
it, and, people started talking about, but they are humans, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's why yeah, it's one of the things that we've done to our database is we've mapped it from B2B to B2C, all those attributes, the demographics, all that information, so we holistic view of that individual. Yeah.
It's important because again, you look at the sort of people, there's an awful lot of individuals who will use a um, different contact details if they're on a social platform than if they're in a work environment.
Mhm.
And, again, this is where some of the things that you can do in the US that we can't do so much in Europe, is that matching and
Mhm.
that mapping and that ability to say this person is this person, and based on a set of rules, do that profiling across. It is actually quite hard in a more compliant driven environment.
Mhm.
And also you then look at the sort of Asia and the Far East markets where it might not be so much about compliance, but it's about culture and
Mhm.
what's culturally acceptable.
Mhm.
Again, it's different. You have to take all those things into consideration when you're looking at personalization. They don't necessarily want you to know all those things about them. They don't want to be directly addressed. It's very face to face still. It's very one to one relationship
Yeah, I have
based.
a lady that did PR for West Africa, and
Mm,
she was, explaining that you don't communicate to West Africa like you do to East Africa.
no.
You know,
Yeah.
personally, I don't know that,
Yeah.
living over here in the United States, but I thought that was very interesting, the
Yeah.
specific way to communicate, and that's what she bridges, so and
It is fascinating. So back to your question about personalization at scale and the technologies and process barriers. I think it is about um, mapping
Mhm,
that end to end engagement life cycle and realistically looking at where are the points where you can add value to the process
mhm,
by personalizing. Where are the points if the less people are believing your website and believing that direct brand,
mhm,
do we need to go into so much investment to put all the personalization on a website?
mhm,
Is it? I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's a question. We have to look at it and go, where is the greatest impact going to be? And what the answer is going to be today is going to be very different in 5 years' time. So how do you keep a track on that?
mhm.
It's but I come back to the beginning. Dear XXX still doesn't cut it. And so many
Oh,
organizations still look at that as personalization.
dear
You know,
customer.
yeah, dear customer, it is not, that is not it.
Yeah,
There is enough
yeah,
there is enough capability to have dynamic content and, understanding and using AI to complete the right
mhm,
approach and the right content and the right wording and the right tone and the right all of those things. That is all fantastic advancements in technology that
and we're
is
just at the beginning.
we are just at the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah, I mean, we're
And
just
that and
yeah.
it's a fascinating subject.
It is. It's fun to be part of as well.
Yeah, it
So
is fun to be part of.
yeah.
You know, there's no one answer. And that's why this whole subject is so interesting these days. There's the rate of change
Mhm.
means, there is no one answer, but there are clear guidance and principles that you can follow
Mhm.
to make sure that you don't fall in some of those traps, which, let's be honest, when you're talking about technology, process data, the traps tend to have a big dollar sign on them as
Mhm.
well. So it
Mhm.
can be extremely costly. If you start rolling in new technologies or, you know, losing your reputation because
I was just gonna say that.
there's that whole reputational piece.
So long to build it, and it can be destroyed overnight. So
Yeah.
that's very important. And then also, how quick is it gonna you have one thing today, and how quick is it gonna mature? It's not even relevant anymore. So, how do you pick and choose? And I'm sure that's one of the things that you guys help navigate for your clients,
Yeah.
which is
Yes,
important.
exactly. This is, I mean, we work on everything on a kind of maturity curve, maturity cycle, and we have a kind of a base level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 maturity in any of these areas. It may be about audience management. It may be about um, interest and preference management, personalization. You can pick all of those topics. The end level is constantly developing. And
Mhm.
therefore, you have to constantly, you can't have more and more and more levels. But as technology and the capabilities expand and mature, so you have to adapt your capabilities within your clients. So we're always looking at you're here. What's the next step? How do we progress you from here to here? How do we move you from, this level of maturity? And clients, all organizations will be better at some things than others.
It's about
So
about
it's
being
keeping
nimble,
balance.
about being nimble.
It is about being nimble.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And that can be hard.
So one last question for you. Looking ahead, what do you think will define success for modern marketing ops teams over the next 1 to 2 years, and how can leaders start preparing today?
I'm going to come back where I started, and it's
Okay.
got to be data. It's got to be data
Data.
because
Okay.
well, no, and I'm
Yeah,
going to
we're all about the data. I get
yeah,
it.
no, but it's for a different reason actually. In terms of the capabilities are moving at such a pace.
Mhm.
AI. Nobody is sure exactly where it's going to land, when it's going to land, how it's got. But one thing is for sure is that an organization is not going to be able to exploit the new opportunities unless they've got the data
Mhm.
in in order.
Mhm.
You can't look at some of the analytics and some of the predictive capabilities that are going to be coming down the line, some of the personalization that are going to be coming down the line, unless you've got clean data.
Mhm.
So it's for a very different
Big
reason.
problem.
Yeah,
It's a
it's a
huge
really
problem.
big problem.
Yeah.
So that is one of them, and the second one is skills and capabilities.
Mhm.
You know, for marketing leaders looking at their target operating models and their organizations of the future. What skills do they need? What new capabilities do they need? Where do they need more? Where do they need less?
Mhm.
That is changing. That is changing rapidly.
Mhm.
And we need to be able to support marketing leaders to say, how do they best prepare the people we've got? Again, you know, you've got a generation coming into the workforce now who've sort of like LLMs and ChatGPT. It's just a way of life.
Mhm.
It's just
Mhm.
what they do. It's
Yeah,
just how they do things.
sure. For
So,
sure.
but you can't have this imbalance in your organization. So your teams, we owe it to our teams now to educate, to demystify, to take some of the fear away of. It's like any technology
Mhm.
advancements, there is fear attached to them. Will it take my job? I remember the days when people thought marketing automation was going to take
Mhm.
the job of the marketer away.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
like it's automating it.
Yep.
AI is the same. We have to, we owe it to educate and help them embrace,
Mhm.
use cases, pilots,
Yes.
make it touchable,
Yeah.
feelable,
And not afraid of it. Not
One
effective.
of the things that we have started doing with a client's marketing teams is doing, lunch and learns where we'll say, come along and we'll build an agent.
Mm,
We'll build an agent over lunch.
mm,
You know, think of a task you hate doing.
mhm,
Think of something that, is it your expenses? Is it your, you know, the actual admin part of your job? I've got to get the press cuttings. I've got to do this report. I've got to do that. Well, let's build an agent. To,
mhm,
and it's a little bit of fun. It's just
mhm, mhm,
starting to help them engage with this future world. So I think in terms of preparing for this world, many things we're still going to have the same pieces. We're still going to have campaigns and channels and content and
mhm.
all the pieces people can be confident about. But it's how you use them. How do you provide evidence of value of marketing back to the organization? How do you attribute, investment and make sure that actually you're doing the right things at the right time? How do you start to embrace new technology? And AI is a classic, it's more new processes than new technology, and start to understand how it can benefit you rather than shy away from it.
Yep,
I think that's a big piece.
and that's why, companies come to people like you. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, we owe it to teams
yeah,
to for them to embrace to understand
yeah,
it and
and not be
embrace it.
not as you mentioned, fear, not be afraid of it.
Not be afraid of it.
Big
There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about it.
yeah. Well, this has been great, Carolyn. So if somebody wants to have a chat with you, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, having said that, website has dropped. Our website is wolfhodson.com. Clearly, LinkedIn. Reach out to me direct. Just message me, and I would love to hear from them.
So it's Carolyn, Caroline,
Yeah,
Hodson, Hodson, and the company is Wolf Hodson, Woolfhodson. So
exactly.
thank you.
And
It's
I would
been
love
very
to hear from
informative.
any questions. These topics are fascinating.
Thank you so much for your time. This was very informative.
Lovely. Thanks, Paula. It was a joy.
That's it for today's episode of B2B Influence. If you picked up something new or found yourself rethinking your approach, take a second to subscribe, leave a quick comment, and share this episode with your network. And don't forget, once we hit 25,000 subscribers, one lucky listener will win a free customer analysis. Just subscribe and comment to enter. If you want to be a guest or know someone pushing the boundaries in B2B marketing, tap the link in the show notes to nominate or apply. And if you're ready to fuel smarter campaigns and more accurate targeting, check out what we're doing at OMI.